morning, class. Unfortunately, we will not have any guest lecturers today. It's just going to be me discussing a couple mechs, continuing on with our Age of War coverage. We're going to be doing the Kyudo today. Kind of change things up a little bit here again on you. So, the Kyudo was developed and released in 2043. It was developed by Martinson Armaments on Terra. It was designed to be lighter and faster, but the big thing with it was meant to be cheaper than the Mackie. This is because, as impressive as the Mackie was, it did suffer from being rather expensive, where the Kyudo is 4.4 million C bills. The Mackie was 8.6. So for half the cost, roughly, you could get a Kyudo. Now, the Kyudo was relegated to second echelon forces, support formations, and during the Amara Civil War, Martinson was destroyed. However, that is not the end of Martinson Armaments, as they were one of the major suppliers for the Word of Blake. Now, some important things to note here is that the Kyudo was not one of those mechs that managed to survive for several centuries. So this will be a relatively short explanation of the mech. It is a 45-ton medium with a top speed of 86 kilometers an hour. As was very prevalent in the Terran Hegemony and the Star League era, any Terran Hegemony mechs were typically outfitted with case systems as well as double heat sinks. It is meant to be a support mech, so they did outfit it originally with an LRM-10. They later upgraded that to an LRM-20. Most importantly, they gave it an Artemis 4 fire control system. But because that is ammunition based, the Terran Hegemony did want it to have a laser weapon. So the earliest version of this is the KY2D01. This unit is outfitted with a large laser and an LRM-20. And you'll notice a 460 movement profile, as well as an armor factor of 101. The arms are kind of the weak point on this thing, with only 9 armor points on each of the arms and the weapons being loaded into said arms. If those get blown off, you are completely disarmed. Forgive the pun. The 01 model also falls into the same issue as a lot of these early mechs. You have primitive gyros, primitive fusion engines, primitive armor. So, unfortunately, this unit did suffer from that, but you have to crawl before you can walk. Earliest version was developed by Brian May. He did have to develop it essentially from scratch, as he had limited access to the Mackie for comparison. Because of the primitive fusion engine, that limited its top speed to that 64 kilometers per hour. 9.5 tons of primitive armor plating results in a lackluster armor profile. This particular unit also lacks the case system that eventually becomes a major component of Terran Hegemony mechs. Standard large laser, the LRM-10. No Artemis systems on this particular model. It does have 12 single heat sinks. So once you get it into position, if you leave it sit somewhere, you can take shots with the large laser and the LRM-10 and be heat neutral. As soon as you have to start moving, you're going to slowly start building up heat. However, given that this unit doesn't have that much in the way of heat generating weaponry, you will typically avoid. So, this is a primitive mech, kind of suffers from. It does have a good movement profile, does have a good damage profile. Not completely heat neutral, but not a bad enough situation that you're really going to be suffering for it, especially if you're running this alongside something like a Mackie, where you do have something that can really draw the enemy's attention. But not long after this thing came out, we did get the 02. And this is the one that um, really cemented the Kyudo. We did drop 2 heat sinks, but we upgraded the remaining 10 to double heat sinks, so we have a full 20 cooling capacity because we dropped the primitive fusion engine and we went to a full fusion engine. The movement profile has now been updated to 580. No jump jets, unfortunately, but that's all right. LRM 20 with that Artemis fire control system. So, if the missiles don't have a lock, the missiles don't fire. Also replace the large laser with an extended range large laser. And with those 10 double heat sinks, even though firing both of those weapons is going to output 18 heat, you will still be able to run this unit at that full 84k an hour and not really overheat, because we also dropped the primitive armor for actual ferrofibrous. We're now up to 143 armor points. Makes the unit more durable, which is always good. The one issue we still have is that both of the weapons are in the arms. So, arms get blown up, you have nothing left. You might as well pull the unit off the battlefield at that point and hope that that doesn't get you overrun. We do have the case system installed on this thing. So even if your ammo is hit in the torso, you will be able to hopefully survive. The case is really good about that. Now, this unit does wind up being a little bit more expensive for those systems, but because it's the Terran Hegemony making it, doesn't really bother them too much. Then we have the 03. Now, the 03 doesn't come around until the Blakist era. And by this point, technology has progressed quite a bit. Now, this unit came about because the Hegemony memory core was rediscovered. Irian Battlemechs Unlimited took one of their maintenance facilities and upgraded it on the planet Lopez. And in 3079, we're able to begin production. Now, the only real change that they made to the mech was they replaced the LRM 20 with a pair of multi-missile launcher 7s. The MMLs are they're interesting. They're interesting to say the least. So you don't get the same volume of fire that you get out of a dedicated SRM or LRM launcher, but this point in history, being able to switch between the two made a world of difference to a lot of pilots, because if something gets in your face and you can shoot it with the equivalent of an SRM launcher without actually having to carry an SRM launcher, but then if something is out of range of the SRM launcher, you can still reach out and hit it with an LRM. That's pretty valuable. I prefer dedicated SRM or LRM missile boats, but to each commander his own. There are a pair of them, so you will have two MML7s. So if this thing gets in close, you're going to be dishing out 28 points of damage. If you're at long range, which is where I would kind of recommend keeping this thing, you'll only be doing about 14, but you do have a range of 21 with those missiles. With a movement profile of 5'8", yeah, it's going to be able to move. The Kyudo is famous for being easy on the pilot. Gives it the design quirk of easy to pilot. It is an early mech, is an early medium, so it does also carry the exposed actuators quirk if you're using the advanced rules. But the 03 and the 02 are what I would recommend running if you're going to use this in a game. If you're going to incorporate this into a lance or into a company, either the 02 or the 03. Those are going to be the ones that you're going to want to rock, because the 01 just suffers from being too old, too early, unless that's the time period you want to run in, by all means. Leaving the relatively obscure Kyudo behind, I will see you guys next time. Class dismissed.